Welcome to Evolve Through God. My name is Angela Goodman. I am your host for this show and likely the rest of them. I'm super excited today because we have a very close friend of mine as a guest today, somebody that came into my life at the beginning of 2025, and I feel like I have known forever now. And he is a magical spirit, an amazing soul, and I can't wait to share him with you today. So, Michael C. Bryan, welcome to Evolve Through God.
Thank you, dear heart. It's I'm glad to be here. I was looking forward to this, for a long time. And people that don't know me, so Angela and I did meet, and I'm from New York, socialized in New York, from Seattle, and people know me there as Mickey, Mike, Michael, whatever you want to call me.
Yeah.
And I was astounded when I got to know you because, being from New York, I'm Mr. Savvy, Mr. City, even though I came from the country. And you continue to astonish me. Your intellect is unrivaled. Your ability to help people is unrivaled. But the thing about you is you just are a force of nature. You're a friggin' force of nature. And every single time we talk, you say something that it's really such a gift to bask in your intellect. Not only your faith, but your intellect. I really enjoy.
I don't think anyone has ever said that to me before. Are you trying to make me cry before we get started?
Well, because I've always said this, people can only see in others what they see in themselves. And I never thought I was smart.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I'm going to blame.
Oh, now I know.
I was going to say, I'm going to blame some people for that. I'm going to blame. Yeah.
But that's why. And I really enjoy an intellectual conversation. I really enjoy someone with a ravenous intellect. And you're constantly turning and swerving and turning in our conversations in a way that tells me that your intellect is extraordinary. And it's just so fun to talk with really smart people. I really enjoy it.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Fortunately, today we're not here to talk about me. We're going to talk about you.
A little bit about you too, but okay. We'll see about that.
I don't know. We'll see about that. So it's so funny. So the beauty of this conversation is that before I have guests on the show, I actually don't want to know much about their relationship and history with God, just because it makes the conversation.
We're already ruined our conversation.
Yeah, we blew that. We blew that from the get-go. Therefore, today I'm even more excited because this will be a different podcast for me because I do know so much about your story. And you have overcome so much in your life and have done it with such grace. And so I'm excited for you to share. But it's true. You have.
And a little bit. Sometimes we've stumbled along the way, but okay.
Hey, dude, listen, we all freaking stumble. That's when God picks us up and carries us, bro. Right?
You know how I know God really
It froze on us for some stupid reason. So say a little bit of the end of that again.
I was joking. I said to a friend of mine, I said, God really, I know that really was protecting me because I'm just glad there was no Instagram in the 80s or 90s. Because I'd probably be serving time. And some of my dearest friends have served time. So no, I met a guy who was in prison for a while and we're going to hang out because he's an amazing man. So I just will say that I'm just really glad TikTok was not around in the 90s.
You know what? I'm glad too. I'm not gonna lie. I'm glad too. There was no need for any of that back in the 90s. I totally agree. Or the early 2000s even. There was no reason for it.
Right.
So
no.
All right. Well, let's start. I want to start from kind of the beginning with you. And again, you can share as much or as little as you want. I know the whole story. So whatever you want to share is fine with me. Such a great life that you have had, but I know so challenging, especially when you were younger. So when did you first start to know about God? Like, were you taught about God at all when you were growing up? Like, what did that look like for you?
No, there was nothing. I was raised Irish, but never Irish Catholic.
Okay.
There was a church downtown. I grew up in a place called Mount Lake Terrace, Washington, little town in Washington State,
Hmm.
little white trash hamlet. And it wasn't so white trash. There were like tires in the front yards and, plastic over some windows.
I
That was the
love it.
lower terrace. We were in the upper terrace, which is very solidly middle class.
Hmm.
No, I went to Sunday school, but it didn't make much of a impression on me. Um, when you said start at the beginning, I heard in my head, let's start at the very beginning.
Oh
So I think
boy.
that's where I first saw God was in Julie Andrews. But that's a whole other story that you and I are aware of.
Yeah.
No, so the really explicit, dramatic, and time that I knew God was real that I'll never forget, and it was a visceral, primal experience. So this is it's TMI for a lot of people, so I'll just stick to the facts, as
You
they
can
say.
you can give them all the TMI you want. People are here to listen. And I will
Yeah.
say this. I will say this.
Mm,
We prayed over this conversation before we started, and what God wants to
mm,
be shared will be shared. And
mm,
and also that there are people that are living through what you
mhm,
may have lived through in your life too. So if you censor
mm,
it, right,
mm,
it may not
mm,
help them. So I'm just going to say that, and then you go on with
mm.
your story.
You know, it reminds me of I have a pillow that I showed somebody recommended me to a beautiful woman that I'm working with that I adore. And
Yes.
I showed her this pillow and she laughed because this is my mantra in life when talking about my life.
Yes, I need that pillow in my life. I'm
Is
gonna
that
give
the
it to
best thing
Matt.
you've ever seen?
I'm gonna give it to
Oh,
Matt. No, you've never showed me that, but I need that pillow
that's
so that every time Matt tells me I'm a lot, I'm gonna show it to him.
well, that's why I like you because you're never a lot to me. I like big, expressive people. I
Yeah.
adore them. That's just why I adore you. Um, my mother would have loved this pillow, which is a good sort of start. Well, yeah, I mean, the truth is, I describe her, my mother, because the mother, she was like a noun. So I describe my mother as a beautiful monster because she was a beautiful monster. And so when I was growing up, my mother was everything. She was my night, my day, my everything. I adored her beyond reason. And it's sort of now that I think about it, it's kind of astounding.
Hmm.
So my mother and I had the best time. She created who you see in front of you. This fantastic. She took me to the movies. We went to disaster movies. She used to say to me, "Don't you love going to movies where people that are dying aren't you?" Like this is kind of a strange perspective, mother.
Quite
Like
the sense of humor.
yeah. We went to Airport 75. I was 60, so that was back in I was 11. And she'd always grab my hand when the plane would hit. And she's like, oh my God. And she would stand up and scream. And people were embarrassed by her extraordinarily gregarious ways. I
Hmm.
just loved it. She created me. So we used to look at movie magazines together. We'd go to all the musicals together,
Hmm.
My homosexuality was foretold in the stars, darling.
Yeah.
And, but there was also a side to my mother I could never quite rectify because I was always a very bouncy, very happy, sunshiny, Willy Wonka, Julie Andrews, Sound of
Hmm.
Music.
Hmm.
This will tell you about my true nature. E.T. is my favorite movie of all time.
Oh my God, and why not?
Yeah, and why
Good
not?
movie. Yeah.
Which for cynical, bitter people is just like arsenic.
Yeah.
But that's really my true spirit, right?
Hmm.
But there was also a darkness that I was always attracted to, and I never could understand when I was younger. Well, what I didn't understand was my mother had borderline personality disorder. And as you know, I have a practice where I help a lot of people who came from similar backgrounds.
Hmm.
I never knew what that big word BPD meant
Hmm.
until I read a book and it described in a very funny term. This author said, it's like the whole enchilada of crazy. You got rice, you got beans, and you got the enchilada. And I thought, well, that's exactly right because it's everything. It's a dose of narcissism. It's a dose of depression, anxiety. My mother was wildly erratic. One day, I could do no wrong. We would cuddle on the couch. We would eat ice cream. We would watch, game shows, which are our favorite, right?
Hmm.
Let's make a deal. Price is right.
Yeah.
And then it was like something would overtake her. Her eyes would go dark and she would fall into a funk for many days, wear ice packs on her forehead, sit in the dark house, horrible headaches. And I wrote TV series about this. As you know, I'm
Yeah.
showing in Hollywood where I live, and books, and they're called Creepy Kid because my mother called me Creepy Kid.
Mm.
And that was her term of endearment, which is kind of strange to most people. But when my mother was, my grandmother was from Idaho, where our whole family's from. My grandmother was schizophrenic, so she heard voices. Now, my grandmother was an extraordinary being. Viola is her name, was her name.
I love that name.
Viola. Isn't that just,
It's a great name, actually.
it's a
Hmm.
great name. And
Hmm.
she was Grandma Dixon. Grandma Dixon always walked around in muumuus that were multicolored. She has turquoise all over her wrists. She always wore a wig that was kind of skewed, you know? She had like, it was always a little grandma. My mother was like, Grandma, fix your wig. And she's like, What's wrong, Joycey? I think it's fine. And, she always smeared a little lipstick and she had like
Hmm.
blue eyeshadow, extraordinary. And she was mad as a hatter and her eyes were like twirling kaleidoscopes. And I just, she was there's fabulous crazy and she was fabulous crazy.
Yeah.
And she used to say to me, Oh, no, I get you, Mike. I get you, Mike. And she always used to hear Elvis in her head. So without telling my mother or anyone in the family, she would hop on a plane and go to Hawaii because Elvis told her he was performing.
Oh,
So then
okay.
we would get a call on the old rotary phone. I'm like, hello? Hey, Mike, it's your Grandma Dixon. Guess what? Elvis isn't here. He told me he was going to be here. And in the background, mom's like, oh, God, give me the phone. Mom, up with this fantastic. We froze again. Oh, there we go. We're
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I'm setting the stage for this in a fun way to tell you about the gregarious, the fabulousness, the color, the light, the music, the art. And my dad was a family psychotherapist and an engineer. So he was very studious, very sweet, very kind. Um, and he was always sort of putting up with my mother's shenanigans, but she was always a little abusive, a little mean to him. She
Hmm.
called him bump on a log. What's your problem, Lynn? Get your shit together. Like she was kind of mean to him, but I didn't get it as a kid. Well, from the outside, it was like all American family. But what was happening was starting at about 8, uh, and this is, I wrote this in the books and the series, and I never wanted to share this because I was ashamed about this.
Hmm.
And I realize now I didn't know any better, but I was beginning to have sexual relations with men in the neighborhood. One
And
guy in
you
particular,
were how old at this age?
8,
8. Okay.
mhm,
Okay.
which is just it's too much to imagine.
Yeah.
You know,
No, 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 no.
You-
An 8-year-old is no, should
mhm,
never
mhm.
be in that situation,
No,
obviously.
no.
And were you
Well,
approached by him? I'm assuming?
yeah, I would. There
Like
was
groomed in that
woods.
way?
I hear the word groomed a lot.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't. I don't. I can't say I was groomed because this is the part that no one wants to talk about. People who were abused.
Hmm.
Two things. One, they people are like, why do you keep going back to the abuser? And two, I was 8 and I was small and I didn't know, but I wanted it. So the shame about that as a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. But you wouldn't have known it if it wasn't presented to you either. So I guess that's how I look at it, right? I mean, at that
Yeah.
age, maybe you wouldn't have known. Now, that's not to say that like the stuff you guys watched, right, didn't introduce it to you because that's possible, right?
Well, I didn't.
But
I didn't. I didn't know what was going on with all that stuff. I just knew that there was a sexual charge in the energy. Mother was way too close to me. She wasn't sexual with me, but she was very loverly like, always
yeah.
fawning over me and that sort of
Yeah.
strange and not normal.
Right.
But so he followed me and we began a sexual relationship. It was
How
at
old
first,
was
it was
he?
not probably 19, 20.
Okay. So in his late teens.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then when I got older, a little older, my mother used to take me to downtown Seattle to the very first Starbucks, which she loved. She used to
Hmm.
say, "Oh, this coffee's great. It makes you shit. You're gonna love this coffee." When you get older, she's like, "I always take a crap right after this coffee," and it's true. Starbucks always made, it was the very first Starbucks. I'll never forget. It was in Pike Place Market in Seattle,
Hmm.
and when you walk into the Starbucks, the floors were warped from all the coffee beans, and every time you stepped on the floor, it smelled like coffee. I'll never forget
Oh
that.
man, that's wild.
Very first Starbucks of all time.
Yeah.
And when we would go there, we had to pass all these porn theaters. So in downtown Seattle, there was a whole row of porn theaters. Now, this was, like 1971 when porn was really starting to become like
The
cool
thing.
and
Yeah.
chic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And soon
Yeah.
Deep Throat and Devil and Miss
Yeah.
Jones would come out.
Yep.
So it was quite like out there and no shame. It was the early 70s and everything was like
Oh yeah. I
post
mean, you're
hippie,
coming off the
sexual.
60s. I was going to say you're coming off the 60s and people were having the sexual revolution. All of that was happening at that time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And soon in the theaters would be like Taxi Driver with Jodie Foster as a prostitute.
Hmm.
And then you'd have Brooke Shields in the movie Pretty Baby. Like it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
It was
what
glorified. It was glorified and glamorized in that time
and
frame.
and
Yeah.
celebrated with just everything, movies, TV, right?
Yeah.
So I remember walking down the street one day in the porn theaters, and this guy was standing outside, and I was about 11, and he was wearing really tight jeans, which is with the flared look, which is now the look again, which cracks me
Hmm.
up.
Hmm.
And he was wearing a polyester top with all these chains, and he saw me, and he's like, "Hey, kid," and I was like entranced by him. Something about him just intrigued me. So when I got home, back then you could write away to places in California and you can get fake IDs. So I wrote away, I took a little clipping out of
How
Mad
did you
Magazine.
find that out at 11? How did you find that
Well,
out?
because I wanted to go to the porn theaters. Something about the porn theaters appealed to me. And I thought,
Attracted
how
you.
can I get into the porn theaters? And I need
Hmm.
fake ID.
Hmm.
So I clipped out this how to get an ID in the back of Mad Magazine. I put it in an envelope to California. 2 months later, I got this ID in the mail as an 18-year-old. Now, I was having the secret sexual life that I was very ashamed of and I knew was wrong. I knew I was gay, which back then was heresy. You just don't
Yeah.
talk about it. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
to explain today that whenever my mother would say to me, "Hey, Mike," at the dinner table, my heart would freeze because I knew she knew I was gay. And all she was asking for was to pass the cottage cheese.
Oh, dang.
But I was always waiting, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So I now had fake ID and it looks like I'm 18.
Hmm.
And I started to go to porn theaters in downtown Seattle and I would sit in these porn theaters
And you
starting
are
at
still
11,
11 or were you older? You
11.
were still 11 and people would let you in with the ID.
It was the 70s. I was living in a life where my
Nobody even
mother
looked at the
was,
ID.
well, no, I thought about this and I looked at pictures of me. I had a weight to me. I looked old for my age. And
Hmm.
um, I was this buoyant kid, but I had a borderline mother who was emotionally and horribly and abusive to me. I had a dad who wasn't protecting me.
Hmm.
I had
You were old for your age in personality.
yeah, my former shrink in New York used to always say, "You've always been old." And he's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So I started at 11 to go to these porn theaters and I would sit in the chairs and old men would fondle me and give me money. And I thought, well, who needs to mow lawn? This is my allowance money. Everyone's like, how do you have so much allowance money? And I'm like, oh, I just mow the lawn a lot and I paint a lot of fences, which is a euphemism. So I pulled a lot of stuff then and I didn't know what I was doing. I subscribed to Playgirl and I had it
Hmm.
shipped to the house as Maria Bryan. And my mother's like, Maria Bryan? Is this you, Mike? And I'm like, no, I don't know who Maria Bryan is. And I just remembered that. And I subscribed to Playgirl. So, well, meanwhile, I'm listening to the Carpenters, Olivia Newton-John,
Right.
Helen
All the
Reddy,
clean, yeah, all the clean things.
all the
You had a
beautiful,
total double life at the ripe age of 11.
right. So 11, 12, 13,
Hmm.
the guy in the neighborhood who I'm not going to say his real name aloud, but I call him in the book Carl. He and I were continuing this relationship and it became, very sexual as far as you can imagine. I won't get too
Yeah.
graphic because
Yeah.
I can't get graphic. and and the shame I felt about that, about wanting him, and
Hmm.
when it came to intercourse, which is a stunning thing to admit. My sister married a man who abused her, and he had in Yakima, Washington, he had a basement full of porn,
Hmm.
So it was always in the family. And I was looking at porn as a 12, 13-year-old. So I knew where things went.
Yeah.
But whenever I would go to downtown Seattle, I would say I'm going out to study, but instead I would go to the porn theaters.
Hmm.
And I would always see these guys standing on the street corner, right? And they would wave at me, I'd wave at them. I didn't say anything, and I was always nervous. And so the big change came about after all these things had occurred. But I was 14, and my mother caught me in bed with a boy at the house. And
Was it the boy from the neighborhood or somebody different?
no, it was a boy whose name I'll say is Ryan, and he's still alive today. And we connected on Facebook.
Okay.
But we were the same age,
Hmm.
and we were, and this was, we're talking this is 1978.
Yeah.
So I mean, you just didn't do these things.
Right.
No
Right.
one, nothing anywhere. The whole, as Harvey Firestein once said in Torch Song Trilogy, he's like, imagine the whole world tells you that you should be gay, but you're not.
Yeah.
You're straight.
Yeah.
So as a gay kid, everything was saying you're straight. So it was like an underground railroad of a life. Like you just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And boys always said, I'm just curious, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So Ryan and I are in bed. My parents found out, and my mother flipped out. She flailed, like literally on the floor, like a fish on a dock, just flopping. My dad blew up, and they said, if you're gay, you can't live here. So they kicked me out.
At 14.
I was 14.
At 14.
And my dad went to the back place where he did all his woodwork and stuff, and had a duffel bag from the Navy, filled it with my clothes, and I was out the door.
Wow.
Now I knew where to go.
Oh,
Because
yeah. Well, you had been building that life. You'd been building that life for a few years.
and I remember I don't, I think about that time I was on the bus, and I didn't think much about it. I just knew, where else am I going to go?
Yeah.
So I got to downtown to the old payphones,
Hmm.
and I called my sister, and I say this with great love for her. And we've talked about this. This is not a new thing I'm going to say, but I don't want this to come across as, because, she was raised by that family. So she had her own stuff to deal with.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
She didn't take me in. And I
Hmm.
told her I needed a place to live, and she did the best she could. So I can't
Yeah.
vilify her. Okay.
Right. Right.
And my other sister was with an abusive husband in Yakima. So that didn't fly.
Well, and that might not, none of that might have boded well for you anyway at that point.
Yeah. And I didn't know my grandma's number. So no one would take me in.
Hmm.
And I sat there with that duffel bag over my shoulder. And as always, it was raining in Seattle. And it sounds very dramatic, but I remember it just like the day. There's street lamps. You're a streetwalker, it's street lamps. And I turned and looked at these guys in the corner, and I knew what I was going to have to do. I was going to have to start turning tricks to survive. And I remember having nowhere to go. And I sat there and I thought, what's going to happen to me?
Hmm.
And I heard deep within me, you're going to be okay.
And that was the first time.
I can hear it now. The timbre, the tone. I am alive because I heard God say to me at 14, you're going to be okay. I hung my hat
Hmm.
on that truth
Yeah. Yeah.
as I went to a secondhand store with a kid named Angel, sweetest guy you ever met downtown. He took me, got me he goes, your hooking shoes, baby. Got
Oh,
me cowboy boots. I know, with holes in them. Showed me how to dress to put your junk to one side so you'd find somebody. Gave me I'll never forget this. I had this big, sweater that was wide open at the chest to expose my chest. It was blue and white. Never forget it. And Angel said, okay. So here's how you know if you are with a John or a cop. And he gave me my education. And a John is a trick, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, when you get in that car, because cars would come down this alleyway where all the male prostitutes
Yeah.
would stand.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you put your tongue down their throat and they lean in, they're a John. If you put your tongue down their throat and they're a cop, they pull back. So the minute you get in the car, when you accept the trick, you got to put your tongue down the throat. So it was funny when I heard that voice, I knew it was going to be okay. And then it was everywhere, all the songs, you know. So I had this ABBA song, Dancing Queen, in my head. And I had turned the first car. Remember, Dancing Queen, young and sweet, only 14. And so I got in the car. This was in my head, meant to
Mm-hmm.
always find the light and the show number in terror. Got in the car. And I saw the guy and I put my tongue down his throat and he leaned in and moaned. And I knew that was it.
Yeah.
So that's when I began. For a while, I would turn tricks. I had regular tricks. I had men who were married that would meet with me in condos. I made out on back of pickup trucks, hay on my butt.
Where did you
Um,
live? Where did you live at that time?
there was a house on Capitol Hill where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
prostitutes lived, and there was a guy who ran it. And I lived there for a while, slept there, stayed there for a spell.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went around to different places. I would sometimes
Did
stay overnight.
anybody know that you were 14?
They didn't care.
I'm just curious whether they knew.
Well, Angel was like 15, maybe. I don't know how old he actually was. And he
Wow.
was trans, he was a trans boy, but all the parts weren't quite right because back then no one talked about that.
Yeah.
Not like
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then, I went back to, I had to go back to my parents, and they let me come back, but part of the time I had to stay in a camper in the backyard because I was gay. Couldn't stay in the house.
Wow. Wow. So do you remember any time like in between then when you were turning tricks, when you were doing the work, do you ever remember hearing that same voice again? Did you ever hear it again? No.
No, it was just resounding. And then when I went back to my parents, we acted like everything was, they didn't know anything. Like they're both dead. They had
Hmm.
no idea that this ever happened.
Yeah.
And in the TV show that I wrote, because I wanted to rewrite a history that I want the happy ending I wanted to,
Right.
it's 4 episodes about a kid who's a fictitious name, but it's true events, who turns tricks, but his dad comes to save him in the series.
Oh.
So my dad saves me in my version,
Yeah.
like he never did.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
right, and the little boy, when he goes back home, the mother says, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean, I had my mother say to me in the series what she never said to me in life.
Right.
And at the end of the series, the boy goes and lives with his grandmother, which I wished I would have done, who loved me. Um, See, the thing that I always say, and I tell people that I work with who have been through trauma, you know, I was never unconditionally loved as a child.
Yeah.
God, in my understanding, and I'll come full circle with a recent story, as you know, is unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always wanted. That's what I never got. And that's what faith to me is about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that voice kept me going. And also, I was really into music. So Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album came out,
Yeah. Yeah.
during the summer of 77, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, a kid. I was suicidal. I was depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. I
Oh
just was
gosh, I can't
really,
I can't even imagine what type of dark place you were in.
I never knew why. Like, I remember distinctly thinking, what's my problem? Why can't I get out of bed? Why don't I have any friends? Like, I didn't
Well,
know
but I
what my
think
problem was.
yeah, but I think to some degree, like I think that apathy in those times that we're meant to get through like that, I feel like
Hmm.
that apathy is a gift from God. It's almost like
Curious.
it's almost like a gift, just like we get the gift of forgetting, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm sure that there are things that happened to you in that time period of your life that you've been gifted with forgetting, right?
Well, to speak to that point,
Yeah.
there's someone in my family, I won't mention them, but they can't remember their childhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they keep saying, I wish I knew. And I'm like, no, you know what? Enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
I I wish I didn't see it so clearly, but
Yeah.
and memory is elusive. Everybody's talked about this.
Right.
Some of these are so sharp in relief, and I wrote about them at the time in some diaries. So I read the what I wrote about, and it matches what I remember. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually have the physical evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Fleetwood Mac's "Don't Stop" came out, that
Mm-hmm.
song,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember playing that damn record, sitting in bed, don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Uh, 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 don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Yesterday's gone. Yesterday's gone.
Mm-hmm.
I just hung on to that song.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow's going to be better. Tomorrow's going to come. I can do it. I can make it. So I need to
Mm-hmm.
listen to that song, Don't Stop, over and over and over to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to add fuel to the fire, when I was born, too, I always say this, but my shrink loved this, but it's true. I was diagnosed, and it's on the birth certificate, with what's called
Mm-hmm.
failure to thrive. And that's where a baby doesn't want to live, basically. And my mother said to me when she was loved, it was up to 3 months. It was so strange. Like suddenly, so this thing in me of darkness and light fighting to keep going, I've always had to choose in my life. And while I can say now I'm more balanced and clear than I've ever been,
Mm-hmm.
there is a relationship to darkness, to pain, to sorrow that I know well. I mean, in high school, my favorite movies, my mother's like, why do you have these on the wall? Was a Carrie, where she killed everybody in high school. So a
Mm-hmm.
bloodied girl,
Yep.
and then Ordinary People. My mother's like, a movie about a suicidal kid and a horrible mother. Can you? And she used to say to me, "Can you imagine having a mother like that?" And I was like, well, mom,
That's why I like the movie Mom, because it's real
yeah,
life for me.
I was obsessed with Ordinary People. So, so
So you hear God's voice at 14.
yeah.
When is the next time in your life that you remember having that voice? And I can already tell you we're going to have to do a second episode because we there's a lot of life left to cover.
Well, someone's
Right?
been alive a long time.
And I know that the listeners at this point are like, okay, well, we know where he's at today. Obviously, he's great and fabulous. So we want to hear like the progression of that, right? So the next time after you're 14, like what is the next time you remember having any contact with that voice?
Well, it was two times, and I'll vault forward, so I don't want you to feel the onus to do part two. So
Oh
we'll
no,
just
we're doing a
okay.
part two. We're doing a part two because we could
Oh,
talk all day
okay.
anyway. So we're just resigned to that right now. And
Signed.
yeah, yeah, in a good way,
Okay.
not in a
Okay.
bad way.
Okay. 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 Well, it was a two-parter. One, so I was with somebody for 13 years, this guy in New York, and love of my life. But he's basically my mother with a penis.
And you were in your 40s, maybe? How old were you?
Yeah.
In
Well,
your 40s.
I met him when I was like 38, and he
Okay.
was 12 years younger man, which is usually the case with me anyway. And so we were together for most of my latter part of my 30s and 40s. And then when I was about to turn 50, we split up. And that was just really horrible for me, like 10 years ago. And I had a breakdown. And then I met my therapist. I cried so hard over the breakdown, I shorted out my computer keyboard.
What?
I'll never forget that. I
You
went to
cried?
Best
You
Buy.
cried over top of your computer? Don't you know not to do that? You're not supposed to get them wet.
I was upset. And
Oh
I said to the
boy.
guy at Best Buy, can I get a replacement? He's like, what's
Oh
wrong? I
my.
said, my boyfriend broke up and I cried so hard I shorted it out. And he's like, I'd never heard that. You know what? I'm going to give you a free keyboard. He was so sweet. Union Square, Manhattan. I'll
There's
never forget
God.
it.
There's God right there. There you go.
Well, I
There he
wasn't going to
is.
say that's God, but that's very funny.
Yeah.
I met my therapist, and we had a huge, because he had, well, I can't say that. Anyway, let's just say he knew a lot about our life, and he was phenomenal. His name is Richard Travers. I got to say his name out loud. He said to me, you and God are meant to know each other. And he was part of Siddha Yoga, Siddha.
Mm-hmm.
Shaktipad is in Siddha Yoga. considered to be when you receive God. And he's like, oh, he's like, baby, you've received God. If you've lived after that mother, that childhood, and
Yeah.
if you just knew what happened between like, 17 to like when I met Andrew, it was, oh, I said his name. That's good. It was, I lived an extreme life. It's
Yeah.
amazing I'm alive and
Yeah.
not dead and any disease. That happened. And then the second time was recently. So,
So let's not tell that one. We're going to save that one for the next episode. But I want to
oh,
hear.
that's a
I
good
want
one
to.
though.
Yeah, it's a great one, which means people will come back
Hmm.
to hear it.
Hmm.
Um, let's let's talk about that time in between when you were in New York, maybe before you met Andrew. Like, what was life like for you then? Before what? I mean, we know
Well,
how you were in your early years, right? We know what you lived through as far as that goes.
so
What
you
was?
want, well, I
Yeah.
left
What was?
Seattle at
Yeah.
23. So talk about that because there was a bunch of stuff in between leaving mom and dad's and then leaving, the West Coast.
Yeah, I
There's
think
a
it's I think it's important for people to understand. And like I said, I have an advantage because I know your life because we've
Mhm,
talked about it
mhm,
all.
mhm,
Um, Before you left Seattle,
mhm.
what did your life look like?
Well, I've been downtown so much that I knew downtown, and I was a bit of a wild child. So at 17, I fled when I finished high school. I fled, right?
Hmm.
And I worked at Denny's for a while. I still have photos. You should see me. I got the mustache. I got the brown hair.
Oh
I'm
my word.
adorable.
How
And yeah, I
many
got
how
the
many
Denny's.
marriage proposals did you get at the Denny's? Because I bet there was
Oh,
a lot.
let me tell you something. Back
Yeah.
then, again, it was still like, we're still talking uh 1983,
Yeah, so
82.
it's still totally taboo to some degree.
Oh, the manager there to this day, she's like, oh, so everyone, just so you know, we got a fairy over there.
A
Michael's a fairy.
fairy.
How's it going, Michael? Now, today, of course, I would have been like, girl, you come over here and say that to my face. Or I would say, thank you. Um, but so I was this just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, somehow just all American thing, right? Well, I
Hmm.
wasn't even 20, and I went to downtown Seattle and went to Capitol Hill. And then I had a whole adventure where I met these guys I became friends with. I went to all these gay bars. And then I met this guy that I fell in love with who was just pure white trash, like overalls with one down, smoking a Marlboro, long hair, just trash. And I loved him, of course, loved the white trash boys. And so when we got together, he had no money. He was older and we began to date and he's like, well, I don't really have a job, but you've made money in the past, why don't you just go back to being a prostitute? And being
Bro,
that
what?
I was looking for love in all the wrong places
What
because
a
I never got love.
great guy.
So what do you think I said to him when he said that? I was 20. I was being carded, trying to get into bars. I wasn't yet 21. And what do you think I said to him when he said that?
Sure, sounds good to me.
Yeah, sure, honey. Whatever you want. So being the the
Mm.
the soon to becoming housewife, which is what I was with Andrew too.
Mm,
I was such a good housewife. I did that, and then we got married because you couldn't back then. And
right.
this was after bars and cars and nights out late. And I remember one time being chased by a guy with a knife down the street with a friend of mine, doing acid on rooftops, having sex in the lawn, sex in the bar. I mean, that is everywhere. And it was fabulous. And it was 1983 and 84, and we just had the oh,
The
I
best
live.
time. The best time.
I was the 80s. And that was amazing. And so speeding forward, then one day my sister said to me, she's like, you know what? We don't get away from mom, we're never gonna make it. And so she pulls out this map, she puts it on the dining room table at our parents' house. She's like, I got a job in New England. We're moving. And literally a week later, we got a U-Haul and left
The two of you together.
with her cowboy boyfriend who was a schmuck. And he was just a wreck, of course. She chose horrible men like I did.
Well, yeah.
Um, and there was a bunch of other stuff that happened in there, car crashes and trips to LA, and I was on TV and 15 and all these things. Anyway, a whole thing. a lot of stuff happened. But then at 23, we moved to we moved to New England. And the first thing I did when we got to this nice little condo, it's just literally like New England cute. I began having affairs with all the couples. I was like, I was like, what am I doing? And I'm like, so I was with this couple and I was with that couple, like this straight married couple, then this gay married couple. And then they'd always fight because one of them liked me more than the other. And I was like, I probably shouldn't be doing this. So my sister had no idea. And I was like, I'm being a bit of a slut. Um, and then I left New England after 9 months and then went to Emerson College in Boston
Hmm.
and had an affair with one of the heads of the college. I won't say who.
Wow, that's a story I've
Um,
heard. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And I was always working in movie stores. Like I worked in video stores in Seattle,
Yeah.
video stores in Boston, because I was so obsessed with movies. I knew I was going to work in the movies somehow. Movies were my church
They were
was
your
actually,
escape. Like
yeah.
legitimately, they were your escape from a very young age and a place that you also went to feel wanted, right? You went to the movie theaters and you were wanted by the men who met you there too. Like the movies have played that role for you in so many different ways.
Well, to the degree, and I distinctly remember to this day. So when the Seattle Times or the Sunday New York Times would come out,
Hmm.
my mother would like take all the sections, and they always gave me the arts and entertainments, always as a child.
Hmm.
And I would flip it open. And when I would see the ads for the movies coming out,
Hmm.
I would get so excited, I'd have a stomach ache. I would be nauseous. And I'm
You'd
like,
have
I gotta go.
anxiety because you wanted to go to the movies.
I
Yeah.
would plan it. I would know what theater. I was obsessed. And so back then, porn was in, you know, these things. And I can tell you now, I saw Fiona on Fire in 1978. I saw Sex World. I saw Insatiable. I saw Insatiable too. See, I know all the movies. And then I
Hmm.
was also simultaneously going to like Carrie and The Fury
Right.
and Smokey and the Bandit and all these
Right.
things.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so then we
So when
time
you get
jump
to,
and
yeah, so you get to Emerson, you get to Emerson
I
and
studied
you had
film,
an,
writing, and producing. An
okay, and you
affair.
had an
Yeah,
affair with the dean.
one of the deans. I'm not going to say who.
Yeah.
Yes. Just like you'd imagine, bespectacled, smoked, jacket, secretly gay with just everything you'd imagine from Boston. Flannels like a fashion
Hmm.
choice in New England.
Hmm.
We lived there, and so one day I had the option to go to New York City, which I'd never been, and I hopped on the Amtrak, and I'll never forget. I had my friend. So in God, I know how I sound right now. In Seattle, I had met this guy. We'll call him Chuck, and his boyfriend. We'll call him Buck. And Chuck was this beautiful man, and Buck was this beautiful black man, and I was young, and so I was like part of their three way too. I had a lot of three
Hmm.
ways,
Hmm.
and so we had sex a lot. We had a great time, and they had moved to New York City. So I said to Chuck, I want to come visit New York, and so I went to New York City. He picked me up in a cab at Penn Station. We went to the World Trade Center,
Mm.
and he zoomed me straight up because the elevators were like surreal, like it was like a bullet.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
remember getting to the top of the World Trade Center and looking over old Manhattan, going, it's not that big. I'll be fine. And Charlie's like, did you hear him? He said it's going to be fine. So they took me down, put me in a cab, and I had the most terrifying cab ride of my life because I'd never been in a New York City cab because we took a
Hmm.
train everywhere.
Yeah.
We went from downtown straight to the West Village. I was terrified. I called my mother because she had been to New York once as a child.
Hmm.
She was very funny. She's like, oh, those yellow demons. They're like demons on the street, like corpuscles. They're like corpuscles,
Oh
right?
boy.
And I'm like, mother. She's like, it's horrible. Look out. You don't want to get mugged. So I stepped out of the cab, and this was like 1988. And I remember, as all New Yorkers will say, the minute my foot hit that pavement, I was like, this is where I have to be. It
Hmm.
was visceral. I was New York.
Mm-hmm.
So then a year later, I moved to New York City, and then, oh, baby, it's 33 years in the concrete jungle. And what I did, the people I met,
How
the people.
how how long between the time you got to New York and the time that you met Andrew?
I met Andrew in 1999. So I
Okay.
was there 10
It was
years
like
before I
10
met
years.
Andrew.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
And so any of this point in time, because we're getting close to time to kind of move to the questions and wrap up this first episode since we're going to do a second one. Um,
It's funny.
so is there any time from the time you're 14 until the time you step foot out of that cab in New York City where the thought even crosses your mind to look to God for anything?
No, not look to God for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But in between there, which we didn't really touch on, but when I was in high school, and in high school, because I went away and I was out of high school for a short spell, then came back. Nobody knew this double life I was leading in high school, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was, I was the guy that had sex with the football players that no one talked about. I
Yeah.
was the thing, but I was
Yeah.
also dating women in high school. No one
Mm-hmm.
knew.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to go to a charismatic all black church. And I thought if this is church, I'm in for it. I could sing, I could
Why did
dance.
you end up there?
Because this guy, will name him Joe,
Okay.
was this beautiful black man in school. And he was, of course, the only black kid because it's like
Yeah, you're
1978
in
in
Washington
Washington.
State. Yeah, geez.
And he was so cool and so hot. And we always played strip poker together a lot. So I saw him in his underwear. We
Mm-hmm.
always played strip poker in high school. That was like so much fun. And you know about this church. And he's like, you with your style, because I was, of course, musical theater,
Mm-hmm.
running
Mm-hmm.
track.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Big
just went to the
personality.
church. Even then I was a cheerleader. They called
You've
us
been
cheer
like that
queer.
since you popped out. Okay, that's
I know.
just
I had
that's just who
sparkles
you
coming
are.
out.
That's just who you are. You had
Kind of
that
a cold
big.
room.
You had that big bedazzled water bottle when you came out. Like that's just who you are.
Speaking of
And
which,
there it is. And there it is. Yes.
um, and the charismatic church, evangelism. My mother, before she died, she turned to baptism because my grandma was originally from Virginia, so we got the Southern stuff in us.
Mm-hmm.
All of us. That's why we all talk like the wreck of the Hesperus and Lord of Goshen, Little Fishes, and we always have Southern expressions.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I could just, to me, that was, and recently we'll talk about this later, but and this has recently happened at the church I visited here. I equated God and church with celebration and joyous voices.
Okay.
I celebrated God with song and dance, and not that, because
Yeah.
that was always
Yeah.
like, to me, God's like, okay. So
God's
my
a party.
therapist, the reason I knew my therapist was the right therapist in New York, he kept saying to me, "When are you going to understand?" He goes, "When are you going to understand?" And he said, what is that? Holy divine, what's it called? Divinely. Oh, he said to me, he looked at me, he's like, "Look at me, Michael. You are divinely favored. You are divinely favored." And I was like, he used to say when I was in high school, this woman came in, she was like, "You're divinely favored, son." And I was like, "Ooh, I don't know what this is, but I like it." And so when he said that, I thought, for me, quiet, stillness, yes, God is there. Give me a tambourine,
Yeah.
give me an alto solo.
And you feel it.
God to me is just meant to be just a let's have a dance party. That's joyous. That to
Yeah.
me is God.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
That's
love
my
it.
version.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to move into my 3 questions that I ask
Okay.
all my guests. And when
Mhm.
we get on together again, which we'll schedule today,
Mm.
we will talk about everything from your feet planting in New York until now.
Mhm.
And I'm going to
Okay.
tell you listeners who are listening to this episode, you do not want to miss episode number 2 because
Yeah.
I spoiler alert know all the stories and have lived
Yeah.
a few of them with Michael as of late. So this podcast I'm so excited to be doing and have you on because
Mm.
your life shows so deeply the mercy and grace and forgiveness
Mm.
of God.
Mm.
So deeply.
I should be dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Your entire life is a testament to the Lord and the work
Mm,
he does through all of us. So
mm, mm.
anyway, um, so I'm going to start asking him a little questions here. And these are going to be as actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's not ask the questions. We're going to do the questions at the end of episode 2. I'm breaking all my rules today. I'm going to break all my rules
Okay.
today. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because some of these questions are more pertinent to your more recent part of your relationship with God. So
Okay.
we're going to hold off and we'll do them in the second episode.
Okay.
So, do
Okay.
you have anything that you would like to share with the audience from the first part of your life before we sign off for today?
Yeah. Today's world is entrenched in talk about, you know, holding space, speaking truth. You know me. I don't like catchphrases, and I think we need to find a new wording for this.
Mm-hmm.
I speak very openly about what happened, and I don't hold back.
Mm-hmm.
I do that for me so that I can let go of any shame, any guilt in there.
Mm-hmm.
I and I do that now because I realize what happened then imbued me with the kind of emotional, intuitive, and insightful gifts that I feel God gave to me to help other people, to serve other people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I meet somebody who says to me, my father used to beat me in the face, used to sexually, physically hurt me as a child, and I was kicked out of my house. They tell me all these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to them, I'm so sorry you went through that, and I really mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I say to them, and anyone listening to this, and I promise you, you will get to this point if you work at it. Then I say, congratulations,
Mm-hmm.
because you are now about to understand the gifts that you have because of that
Mm-hmm.
are absolutely miraculous.
Yeah.
And above all, anybody out there who's hearing this, who's been abused and hurt, please return back to what I said. Unconditionally love yourself
Mm-hmm.
and know that God is unconditional love
Yeah.
for you because of you. You are whole, you are complete.
I love that. What a great way to end the episode today.
Mhm.
You're such a beautiful human, and I love you so much. And I'm so glad that
I
you're
love
on
you
here.
too. I love you too.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening to this episode of Evolve Through God. Please make sure you join us, especially for Michael's second episode, which should be released next week. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.